Okay, today we are doing our second set of notes, but it's actually your first time doing it alone, and so that's kind of fun. Now, if you remember, we have our vocabulary words up at the top. Vocab is just so essential for math because if you don't know your vocab, you're really going to struggle. And so we're actually going to highlight. You don't have to highlight. I'm going to highlight my vocabulary just so you know how extremely important this vocab is. And now, anything from this point that I write, you need to make sure you write as well. So remember, up in the top, you should have a 2 because this is our second page of notes. Now, we have an integer, which we talked about yesterday, and it's a positive slash or a negative whole number. And then we have positive numbers, which are any number greater than 0. A negative number is the opposite. It's any number less than 0. Okay, a neutral number, there's only one neutral number, and it is 0. So if you notice, there's no equal sign under this. It's just numbers greater than, numbers less than, and 0 is a neutral number. Okay, these two words are new to us. We have opposite. Opposite are numbers on opposite sides of a number line, and they're the same distance from 0. Okay, they're on opposite sides of the number line and they're the same distance from 0. I am so sorry, it's a little blurry. It's my camera, I just can't fix it. I'm hoping to get a new one soon, but until then, just hang in there with me. Okay, on opposite sides of the number line, but they're the same distance from 0. So for example, you might have 2 and negative 2. Those are opposites. 7 and negative 7 are opposites. Okay, next, you have an absolute value. Absolute value, you need to write 2 words and write them big, and it's distance from 0. The absolute value is the distance from 0. That is all it is. That sums it up. Distance from 0. Alright, so now as we go through these steps, I'm going to be working out one of the problems down here so you can actually see it. So for example, down here we have some steps. Step 1 says to find the absolute value of a number. You graph the number. I'm just going to let you scribble this out. You graph the number on a number line. To find the absolute value of a number, graph the number on a number line. For example, what an absolute value sign looks like is this. Okay, it's the distance from 0 and it has those 2 straight vertical lines. And so here's our example. We have negative 5. And I want you to draw in your absolute value signs. You need to know exactly what it looks like. They are not parentheses. They are straight vertical lines. This is an absolute value sign. This is actually an equation. It's telling you to find the absolute value, which means the distance from 0. So we're going to graph it on a number line. So down here you can see your number line. So if you were to graph this, you have 0 and you have negative 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm highlighting the dot I put there. After we graph the number on our number line, we're going to count how far from 0 it is on that number line. So now look at, we have 0 here, and now we are going to count how many it is away. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5 steps away. And so the absolute value of -5 is 5. And this is the answer. It's actually really simple. When you see an absolute value sign, it's how far is that number from 0. So let's say I gave you, here's another example, the absolute value of -1. If you look down here, I have the absolute value of -1. And you would solve that by saying how far is -1 away from 0? And it's 1 place. And so the absolute value of -1 is 1. Really simple once you get the hang of it, right? Absolute values will never be negative. They cannot be negative. It's a distance. It's a distance from 0. So for example, think about if you're in a car and you reverse and you go down your driveway and you go back, let's say 10 feet. You don't say, oh, I went -10 feet. No, you just went backwards 10 feet. But it's still a positive. You still are moving a distance, and that distance is a number. Okay, it's not a negative. You can't go a negative distance. You can't go -2 steps back or -10 feet back. You just go 10 feet back or 2 steps south. Okay, absolute value is a distance, so it's always, always, always positive. In that case, what about if I said find the absolute value of 2? The absolute value of 2, down here you have 2. So you're going to go 1, 2. It is still 2 places away from 0. Okay? Now, here's just a hint when you're thinking about integers, is that when you're looking at positive numbers and when you're comparing numbers, a positive is always greater than a negative. Okay, so if the numbers are going right, they're getting larger. And if they're going left, they're getting smaller. And that's just for comparing and contrasting numbers. So now, if we look down here, we have our practice problems. We have our together and what you need to do as practice. And so the first step says to find the absolute value, which, just a reminder, is the distance from 0. And so if you are trying to find the absolute value of 7, you would find, let's add a 7 over here on my number line, and let's count how far it is away from 0. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it is 7. -1, we actually did that. It's right up here. -1 is 1. -3, here's your -3. So let's count how far that is away from 0. You have 1, 2, 3. Next we have, okay, here, this is an interesting one. Is that negative inside of your absolute value sign? No. The negative is on the outside. So we're just going to ignore that negative for a second. Let's look at our absolute value. What is the absolute value of 14? How far away from 0 is 14? Okay, that one's easy. It's just 14. Now, we have to add the negative. Because that negative isn't inside, if the negative is inside, then you're looking at a -3. This one, you're just looking at 14. And then whatever number comes out is negative. Okay, that negative is important, whether it's inside the equation or outside the equation. Now we are going to compare these numbers using a greater than, less than, or equals to sign. So looking at this number, you have the absolute value of -2. The absolute value of -2 is 1, 2. So that's 2. And you have a -1. So what is greater? Remember, the larger numbers are on this side. So you have a 2 and a -1. The 2 is greater. Next you have a -7. I don't know what that is. You have a -7, the absolute value of 6. The absolute value of 6 is the distance from 0, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what is greater? -7, which is over here, or +6? It's going to be 6. Because the numbers get larger this way. Although the 7 is bigger than the 6, because it's a negative, it means it's smaller. Just think about it like money. You would rather be +$6 than -$7.